This Hangout on Air is now live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Talking About Survivor. I'm Christiana Ellis.
And I'm Mike Routine. On mine, it still shows off air. Does yours show?
Oh, mine shows live, so I think we're good.
Mine just popped live. We're good.
All right, we're hosting. This is the episode where we're going to talk about the second episode of Survivor Cambodia Second Chance, because they keep kind of going back and forth what they're calling it for whatever reason in the marketing. So is it Survivor Cambodia or is it Survivor Second Chance? Should be Second Chance because they've already had a Survivor Cambodia, but whatever. Anyway.
But they also want us to know they're in Cambodia.
Yeah, sure, why not? Got Angkor Wat to look at. I don't know about you, but I really liked this episode for reasons that I wouldn't have predicted. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I really liked this episode. I guess I never considered whether they were reasons I would have predicted or not. I mean, I did like it. Maybe, you'll have to tell me what you're thinking, but I could see the people I liked ended up in the wrong spot. So I didn't like people I was rooting for. So I didn't like that part of it. But the way that it happened, I really enjoyed, and they kind of deserved it. In fact, not just kind of. They definitely deserved it.
Yeah. Well, so where I was coming from is, on the one hand, it's always nice when we talk about something in an episode and then the next episode provides like the most incredible object lesson of exactly what we were talking about, that being Abby Maria. And if you have people who are more able to tolerate her than others, that gives them power.
Yep.
And that's exactly what happened here. But also just the surprise that I would not have expected. If you had told me that the episode would make me feel bad for Abby Maria, I would not have believed you. I would have been skeptical, but it did. Which does not make her completely in the right, but I did feel bad for her.
Yes. Her behavior did not merit the treatment that she received.
Mm-hmm.
This was not her getting hers or whatever. This was over the top, and it was not necessary.
Well, and more to kind of what made me feel it. I think what made me switch in my brain in terms of how I was feeling about it is, last time when we heard her talking about how she was really trying to not overreact to things, but we were laughing about how her not trying seemed to be just making it all very passive aggressive and indirect. But this time I felt like I could see her making a strong effort to try. And while the problem is like when someone is so far on the extreme in terms of outside the norm behavior, they can make substantial progress coming back to the center and still be seen as the outlier. And I think that's what's happening here, is that she really is making an effort, and it seems like she was actually improving, but not enough that was being perceived by the people in the center.
Right.
And that I could totally see, like when she was being left alone on the beach, I was just thinking, like, I put myself in her position, is like, she's really trying. She recognized what people had said before, and she was really making an effort and feeling like she's doing better. And now she's being utterly rejected, even by the people she thought were on her side. That's got to be a terrible feeling. And I really felt for her there.
Yeah, I mean, she was genuinely, like, this wasn't a show and like crying to try to get somebody to come, basically baiting for the compliment or the, comfort. Like, I mean, she articulated it very well what hurt her the most, and it was particularly that it was Shireen,
Yeah.
who she thought she would really be able to get along with because she felt like they shared the idea of being misunderstood and somewhat almost lonely on
Mm-hmm.
their seasons. And she thought that that was the bond that they shared. And then not only was Shireen participating in the talk behind her back that she called out PG on,
Mm-hmm.
but she turned her back on her and started laughing at her when PG like confronted her.
Yeah.
And that was like just extra hurtful. You could see, like,
Mm-hmm.
wait, you're the person that is supposed to understand how I'm feeling, and now you're not going to help me in this confrontational situation,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're going to leave me alone and go laugh at me? Like, that hurts. I mean,
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, it's like I can feel this and still not 100% blame the others for feeling the way they did, because I feel like making progress or otherwise, I would imagine that spending 24/7 with Abby Maria is still probably pretty hard to take. Just because even if she is making progress, a lot of the stuff she's doing would still be pretty annoying. And it's just an interesting dilemma, both from a game perspective, but also just from a human perspective of how to deal with someone who causes drama and conflict in your life, and yet to spurn them for that reason does harm to that person. You know, and it's hard to know how to deal with stuff like that. But so that, you know, this was a perfect illustration, you know, because we have episodes where the physical aspect of the game is in the spotlight. We have had episodes where the strategic element is in the spotlight, but this was a good episode to show how important the social game is. And you know, that dovetails with strategy, but they're not one and the same.
well, and I like that this highlighted a different part of the social game than we normally like hear as a social game. Like this, the social game is often referred to as, being able to, you know, influence people, and almost sometimes feels like it means to be manipulative. And I know that's not exclusively, but that's often part of when they say the social game. It's about navigating the group dynamics in a way that almost sometimes this feels like you're manipulating them. And this was nice to see that sometimes the social game is literally just like you being a nice person, and these other people were not nice people, so I would
Mm-hmm.
rather vote with you because you're nice to me,
Yeah.
genuinely nice to me. And I know Terry definitely took it as an opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
but I thought it was nice because I think that it was genuine as well.
Yeah.
And so he knew it was advantageous to him, but he was not being disingenuous. And it was just nice that those two things were allowed to not be mutually exclusive,
Yeah. Well, it's like it's the positive flip side of the times where we talk about how people will use phony strategy talk to justify what they would want to do anyway. Like if someone is feeling lazy and they don't want to work at camp, they come up with some reason why it's the strategy that they shouldn't work at camp, that sort of thing. Well, this is like the flip side of that, of how that can be kind of a positive thing too, is that if you want to be able to be compassionate to people, you find a way to make that strategy work for you.
Yes. And I also thought, I mean, I know that, the producers can only edit the whole old school versus new school thing so much. I mean, there's plenty of it that actually exists out there.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was a nice payoff that sort of the Terry merged essentially what they were saying was old school and what
Mm-hmm.
was new school. he said old school was like right now you just all are trying to get along, get your shelter. That's the old school way. You don't worry about it until it's time or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You don't jump into strategies and alliances and all those kind of things. So he was able to use what he wanted to do, like we said, anyway, and it was also a strategy.
Yeah, yeah. So if we jump back to the beginning of the episode, we started off with Kelly Wigglesworth bummed at the outcome of the tribal council because, of course, Vetus was in her alliance, the old school alliance, and her sort of recognizing, oh, this is happening more quickly than I thought. It was clear that everyone knew exactly what had happened in terms of it being Jeff who flipped. But of course, I think as we talked about last time, the bit cut out of the tribal council sounds like it had made it clear to everyone even before voting that that's exactly what happened.
Yep.
So I thought it was kind of funny that just given the timeline of everything that happened, Kelly Wentworth hadn't even had a chance to look at her idol. Because she grabbed it in the middle of the challenge and then they walked straight to tribal council and then they walked straight back from tribal council and went to bed. And so she's like, now it's dark. So it's like, so the fact that she couldn't even look at it till the next morning was kind of funny. And I really liked her in that scene too, talking about how she wanted to play aggressively this time. And, I mean, I kind of liked last time how she got so many great moments of the suspense of getting the idol in the first place and everything. But I'm continuing to like her, I guess, even more than I expected. I'm paying attention to her.
Yeah.
And especially given that she made some smart moves later in the sense of she really would have wanted to stay aligned with Spencer and Shireen, except she just recognized that the writing was on the wall. The wind was blowing the other way, and she was not going to go down on that ship with them.
Yes.
And so she was able to recognize that before she got painted with the same brush that they were. And I thought that was smart of her, even though obviously it wasn't the way she would have preferred it to go down.
Yep.
So I thought it was... in hindsight, it's kind of interesting and emblematic of the problem that when the New School Alliance is now discussing what their next step is, they're counting Abby in their numbers, but not including her in the conversation. So they're talking about like, well, who do we want to go for next? What's the plan? And she is not there. But then when they list up how they have 5 people, they're counting Abby.
Yes. So they were clearly dismissive of her.
Mm-hmm.
Even before that, yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's like other than the fact that good gameplay requires that you be aware of and have respect for for each player on the game, at least in the sense that they have a vote. Even if you don't respect them as a person, you have to respect that they still can vote for somebody, and that's, that's really more important than whether you respect them as a person at this stage of the game.
Yes.
And so you have to, I think the problem, and we had this later with Spencer talking about her as a permanent liability. I think that they had really stopped even thinking of her as a person. Like she was this entity that created drama, but I guess she's on our side, and what a bummer that we have to have her on our side in order to have the numbers. And like, I like Spencer, but just like that attitude, even though I could understand emotionally where it would come from, that was exactly the attitude that made all this play out.
Right.
So Jeff Varner is continuing to impress in terms of playing really big for a supposed old school guy.
Yep.
So for him to do what he did last time and then immediately this time want to flip back and say that he only did it to wake up his old school guys, like, I mean, that's one of those, I don't know about you, but when he was saying that was the reason, I was kind of like, No, I don't know if that math checks out. That kind of. Now, if you want to make another big move right after that big move, okay. But let's not pretend that you're some chess grandmaster here who's just did a Queen's Gambit or something. I mean,
It was funny. Yeah.
you spent that whole first episode talking about how you didn't know what you were doing.
Yeah.
And not only that, but you spilled the entire alliance and how you were going to vote in the tribal council,
Yes.
the first tribal council. But it was all for a secret ulterior motive.
Well, I think what this was showing is that he continues to not know what he's doing. And so he's like, yeah, big moves. Let's make another big move. That's how we play now. That's the strategy.
Yeah.
Here's my next big move. Like, it's going to get him in trouble eventually by the end of the season if he doesn't kind of
Yeah.
calm down. You know?
Exactly. And I think you're right. But in the meantime, I am enormously pleased that he is not knowing what he's doing in an entertaining way.
Yes.
So I am enjoying him a lot already on this season.
Yeah.
And not only that, but even though, as we've talked about, generally speaking, this is pretty early in the season to be going after threats rather than trying to keep your tribe strong. But in terms of going after threats, certainly Shireen and Spencer talking strategy constantly is a perfect illustration of the kind of people that you want to get out before they get you out, right? And not only that, but in terms of keeping the tribe strong for challenges, they're not necessarily your tribe powerhouses.
Right. Well, and to Jeff's point is, you don't necessarily have to get rid of both of them.
Mm-hmm. Just need them to not be able to tag team each other.
Right. You just cut one, and then you've essentially disabled the other one, and you can decide the next time you go, do you want to get rid of that person, or do you want to, use them as a strategic person?
You can make them yours if they don't have a partner.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Because of course, we saw at the end of this one, Spencer is substantively humbled at the end.
Yes.
But in any case, he goes and tells Terry about his real plan, and Terry is understandably on board. Because why wouldn't he be?
Yes, I am now not in the minority about to get picked off.
Yeah. The guy that I thought was on my side originally, who then voted against me to my surprise, is now deciding he's back with me again. So, yay. I think. I mean, I guess that's better than him still being on the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
So then we got an interesting scene with Joe making a hammock, which was interesting and seemed to go over well, but I couldn't help but my first thought was like, is he cutting up their fishing nets to do that?
Yes. He was using their fishing net.
So that kind of struck me as like, that's not really what the fishing net is for. But
I thought there was a clever edit in there, like when they were calling him like MacGyver,
Survivor MacGyver, yeah.
MacGyver. That quote was said while Joe was out collecting fish with other parts of the fishing net. So I think I mean, they're good at what they do. I think that was planned for people who were like exactly like we were, like, are they cutting up their fishing net to show that for whatever reason they have enough fishing net that they are still fishing.
Yeah.
They not just waste their fishing net. Now, whether they need it again later, I don't know, but he clearly was fishing with a fishing net after he had built the hammocks.
Yeah. So he's everyone seemed to be a fan of the hammocks, and so I wasn't going to worry too much for him on his behalf. If other people, I feel like if it was going to be a problem on the show, we would have cut to a couple of confessionals of people going, I wish he had talked to us before he just cut up the fishing nets, that sort of thing. But nobody said that, so it sounds like it may have been like a group decision anyway. Like, or maybe he ran it by everyone and there was lots of extra fishing net or something. But, Steven, despite not playing especially well right now, I don't think, does probably have a point that Joe becoming Survivor MacGyver and just doing, this, I don't want to call it an act, but the whole golden boy thing is coming on a little strong, and he probably is making himself a big target more than he has to. Although, I think we know from previous season that that's just Joe's playing the way that he wants to play. And, maybe if he toned it down, that would be less of a target on his back, but then he would have to play in a way that he doesn't want to play.
Yep. I agree. I mean, that's what I love, the fact that he's just, hey, I'm enjoying the hell out of this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make some hammocks, and yeah, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Funnily enough, for someone who was really on the most recent season, he's playing kind of old school, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in any case, this is where we actually first got to Abby talking about she's upset that she got 4 votes. She's trying not to explode. But then we got this whole bit where PG and Shireen were not being careful while they talked about her. Abby overhears them. And I have to say, like, this was the scene that, the preview made it look like, well, Abby's back to her old behavior. But I really didn't think that that's what happened here. I thought, all things considered, given what we know about her, that she was really respectful and restrained when she approached PG very reasonably and saying, listen, I can hear you. And I wish that if that's how you felt, that you could say it to my face instead of behind my back. And she didn't seem like she wasn't yelling, and like she got more upset later, but it wasn't like a screaming argument. It was, I thought she handled herself really well there, considering. Now, obviously, yeah, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just agreeing with you. Yeah.
Given that everybody feeling the way they did about her was really due to her own behavior earlier. So again, you can't let her off the hook completely. But as far as that scene went, I thought she handled herself really well, which, is all the more reason that having it finish with her going off to be by herself, feeling very unloved, disrespected, embarrassed, and having everyone else go back to camp and laugh about that. Yep. I'm sure that at the time, they were just so focused on, she's been making us crazy all this time, and I can't believe we just released all that tension. And that's what they're thinking. But obviously, from our perspective, it comes across as cruel.
Yeah. And her perspective.
Yeah. Well, and I think anybody's seen from the outsider point of view. I think it's, I think any of them can realize after the fact, oh, yeah, that was probably not cool, huh? But they were kind of so caught up in it, because I think that there was kind of, everybody's been walking on eggshells with her, and they're only a couple of days in, and this had to feel like, it was like PG coming back and saying, oh, it feels good to have had this argument, because I think everyone's having kind of this almost giddy feeling of release of tension.
Right.
Because it's kind of like everybody's been waiting for something like this to happen. And now it has. So it's like, oh, it's like a relief.
Right. Which also goes back to your point that it was clear that Abby was restraining herself, because that restraint was almost causing more tension.
Yeah.
Because they could feel the restraint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like part of the problem, I think, is that she, like a lot of people when they are trying to change behavior like that, I think she's very sort of validation seeking. Like she wants everyone to give her credit for the effort she's making.
Yeah.
Which isn't really fair to the other people. But at the same, you know, because it's like self-improvement has to be its own reward. You know what I mean? You can't decide that you're going to do it just in order to get better results from the people around you. That's not a productive way to approach it. But it's understandable. It's a human reaction to have someone do that. But so that whole thing of, I found my bracelet in PG's bag. The old me would have just gone over and screamed at her. But I'm not going to do that because I know that I shouldn't. But now I've got all this unspent energy, and I need someone to pat me on the back for not going over to scream at her. And so I need everyone to understand how hard this was for me. And so she ends up talking to everybody about how, oh, I could have just yelled at her, but no, see how good I'm being. And then for everyone else, that's like, okay, you're bringing me into it now, and like, it almost would have been better if you had just like she's overcorrecting. You know what I mean? Like the correct approach would have been, instead of going over and screaming at her, would have been to just actually go and talk to her and say, hey, PG, I found my bracelet in my bag and I thought that was a little weird. Can we talk about that? You know, and it would, and if she was emotionally healthy in that regard, it would have been a nothing conversation. PG would have said, oh, was it really? I mean, I got the bag. It didn't have a name on it. I didn't realize there was anything in it. Oh, okay. That explains it. Now we're friends.
Yep.
But instead, she overshoots on the other side, not talking about it, making it a whole big thing now that includes everybody. There's suspense and tension. But we talked about that already last time. So in any case, though, lots of people are all kind of saying the same thing about her, though. Spencer calls her a permanent liability, like a cancer that they have to carry. Jeff Varner is more on the other side. And this is what I was already thinking about, though, is saying that he calls her their own little Brazilian soap opera. Which is, I mean, it's not really a very respectful thing to say, but it's also still at least on the side that we were talking about last time of the people who are more able to tolerate what she's doing have that power.
Yep.
So let's see. And then he's also thinking at that time that, like, because if everyone hates her, then it's a great person to bring along, because no one would ever want her to win. So then over at the other camp, this is where we get another scene that started one way, where I thought I was going to feel one way about it, and then it turned into a whole other thing, and that is Andrew Savage talking about how he met his wife.
Right.
And it starts off with this weird thing, like it's a brag, and this bizarre detail about how he had Playboys on his desk, and it's this weird story at the beginning. But then as he's getting into it, it seems like it takes this turn where he's actually sincerely emotionally worked up about it. It doesn't seem like a put on.
No.
Because like he was starting to tell the story in a whole different tone, and it's like the emotion of it took it over against his will almost.
Right, and I think my feeling was that, yeah, because I got the same sort of sense at the beginning because of the way, like, you know, when I was in Chicago, one of my clients was Playboy magazine, and the first time I met my wife, you know, you sort of you're starting to connect dots that aren't there already,
Mm-hmm.
and his tone, I think, was actually truly pride in his wife, not bragging about it, but because just the way that the story was told, it kind of came out a weird way.
He's telling it like the meet cute funny anecdote is what he's telling. You know, it's like, isn't it funny that the first time I met my wife, there were Playboys on the desk? Isn't that silly?
Yeah, and then it goes into takes this whole other turn, and yeah.
And then it really seemed to move a number of other people too. Like Cass is talking about how it's like, I came here almost all prepared to be Chaos Cass again. And yet now I feel like it doesn't have to be that way. I'm playing with better people and it makes me want to play better as a result. And I thought that was really interesting. And then, of course, Jeremy is missing his wife who's pregnant. And, of course, he's finding that his intent to stay all business on the game is being interfered with by the genuine emotion, which I liked. I'm continuing to really like Jeremy.
Yeah.
And then this is the key bit that I was thinking of when I mentioned how Steven is not playing especially well right now, because there's this whole thing of Steven is already the one that everyone else has noticed being off looking for the idol. And to have someone not present and immediately speculate that they must be looking for the idol tells, you're revealing more about yourself than anybody else there, and you don't seem to grasp that because everyone else is still in this real genuine emotional moment, and you're suddenly paranoid and suspicious in gameplay again.
Yeah, he did not read the emotion in the room, or what you want to say. Like,
no,
he did not pick up on that. Like, even if that was something he wanted, he was believing and wanted to bring attention to, that was not a time to do it.
Yeah.
Totally misread where everybody else was going with this,
Yeah, I think unfortunately Steven is kind of flailing a little bit. Because we talked last time about he's already feeling like he's an outsider. The other guys on his tribe are not his kind of guys. He doesn't really know how to relate to them very well. And he's feeling like an outsider already. And I think that he is just kind of, he's the wheels in his head are sort of free spinning and not actually engaging the gears. He's not able to be sensing what's happening around him as well as he ought to be. If that analogy makes any sense.
Yeah, I'm just kind of thinking through that. And I was thinking back to his other season, he was the same way. Like, he's not any different.
Mm-hmm.
He just had a confidant who was very, very good at all of the things that he's not.
They complemented each other in
Very
that
well,
season.
yeah.
Yeah. He doesn't have that counterpart here.
No.
And in some ways he's almost actively avoiding that dynamic because it landed him second place last time.
Right. But what he's misunderstanding is that if he wants to continue in the game, he has to himself embody both pieces. He can't just be the same person that JD was buffering, because then there's no buffer.
Yeah.
He has to have the social skills of JD while having the, mind. Not that JD didn't have the mind for the game. Like, it just, he was the one always where it was like really spinning, and then JD was like able to like pull out the best ideas.
Was it JT?
JT, yes. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
but yes, it was JT. He was able to like pull the best ideas out of those spinning wheels, kind of get the focus out of him, and then he was the one that was able to go and talk to everybody else and read the temperature. So he would be able to say, Steven, yeah, but we shouldn't talk about that right now because that's not how everybody else is feeling. That he has to have both pieces if he wants to play well in this game.
Yeah.
You can't just say, oh, I was second place, I need to get rid of that whole part of the game. Well, that whole part of the game got you to the end. So if you don't want that, you have to be that.
Yeah, exactly. And now that said, I don't know that he's in any immediate danger, if only just because I think no one perceives him as a threat. I think in his tribe, he is the guy that they could get rid of at any time. So there's no rush.
Well, yeah, and obviously it's going to be even more. It's hard to say who's in any immediate danger anymore.
Yeah, with the promised twist from next time. Like, who even knows? I mean, who knows? Steven might end up with a much better chemistry with whoever his new tribe mates are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, imagine, what do you think if he ended up being able to hook up with Spencer?
That's a weird one because I want to see how Spencer responds to his humbling.
Yeah.
Because if he takes this as, say they hooked up to not like that, but
Well,
were,
yeah.
they were connected on the same tribe, and they
No,
decided
they were partners. Oh, wait, no.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It could end up if Spencer doesn't treat it properly, he could end up in the exact same position that he was in because Steven is almost is I very similar to Shireen in that
Mm.
like his head is he's smart and he knows and he sees all these angles, and he wants to talk through all this stuff and like
Mm-hmm.
and if they get into that, then it's gonna be like, well, there's that again. But if Spencer is truly genuinely like, no, can't just do that. I'm gonna actually learn who these people are, then he could potentially because Spencer is not he's not socially inept. He just sometimes forgets to do what he knows is right because
Yeah.
he's on a different plane.
I think what happened with Spencer and Shireen this time is that they just clicked with each other so much more than they really even expected.
Kind of.
That was just such a pleasant chemistry. The two of them talking strategy. They enjoyed that so much that they lost sight of how much they were doing it in proportion to everything else.
Right. Especially when they felt like they had a 5-3 advantage.
Mm-hmm.
It just they didn't feel like they needed to deal with those those outlying pieces.
Yeah. So I lost my place in my notes. Okay, so this is where oh, okay, see, this is actually where we had the confrontation between Abby and PG. Earlier, it had been I had a note that sounded like that, but it was just a bit earlier that it had been a snippet of a scene that was illustrating the kind of things she was doing to annoy everybody. And so, but this is actually the point in the episode where that actual confrontation happened.
Right.
And then this is where I went to feel it really, like, we kind of talked through this bit already, but, we can also maybe just reiterate good for Terry, both as a person and as a player, really, even though that seems like it's secondary. It was a fringe benefit of him being a compassionate person to realize, we got a girl crying by herself while people laugh at her. That's kind of not okay in just life.
Yep.
And so he goes out to console her, but we kind of talked about that. And then Jeff Varner also a little bit later, I think it was in the next morning, he kind of gave her a little bit of a pep talk too, and so she was feeling better going into challenge time, but certainly better also in the sense of saying, you guys, I'm totally not with them anymore. So if you want to vote,
here I am.
Yeah. Yep. So time for the challenge. We got pretty standard blend of activities in the sense you got obstacles to climb over, and then a strength thing, and then a puzzle. And then for immunity and a pretty substantial survivor toolkit.
Yes.
Axes and hammers and bamboo nails.
Yes.
Which appeared
way more than I've ever seen. And yeah.
Especially given that we kind of talked in the first episode about how it seemed like they got a lot of stuff off the boats too. But hey, I was a little weirded out by the bamboo nails, because they just seemed to be wooden stakes, and I was just wondering, are they just wood that's harder than bamboo, so you could kind of pound it through, or are they made of bamboo? In which case, what are you nailing with them?
I guess I just assumed they were made of bamboo and didn't think past that.
Yeah. Maybe they're just, shaped bamboo stakes that you don't like, not nail like we think of a nail that you pound through wood, but that it would be something that, like rope or vines could be wrapped around to hold things together.
Somebody will figure out something to do with it.
We could probably Google it. But right now, we're going to talk about how the challenge goes. The Bayonne tribe sits out Sierra. What did you think about how focused Jeff was on how everybody seems to be skidding down the side as though that's not what they were supposed to do somehow? Because I kept hearing him say that, and I was thinking, well, like, how else is anybody supposed to do that? It's too steep. You can't run down it. You fall on your face.
Yeah, I think he was just trying to like make it sound more painful and dramatic than it was.
Yeah, I guess so.
Like, we're losing a lot of skin today. He said something weird like that.
Yeah. Like it felt weird to me because a lot of what he was saying, like the tone sounded like he was judging them for not doing this the way that it ought to be done. And as a result, they're going to get scraped up more than they should. But I was just looking at those obstacles. I don't see how you could do it any other way.
Yeah, I took it as more of like, look how hard we designed these obstacles. Like, if you're not careful, like, if you want to go fast, you're going to take the pain.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, and I suppose the alternative to sliding down on your butt could be having someone who's on the top lower you down.
Yeah, you could get down it without like sliding down it and scraping yourself up, but that's not how the game is designed. Like, you have to be fast.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in any case, the Bayonne tribe is the first to the puzzle by a significant margin. We start with Cass and Kimmy working on the puzzle. When the other tribe, Takeo, comes, we start with Kelly Wentworth and PG starting the puzzle, which later becomes Spencer and Shireen. Lots of shouting. Although that did look like a really difficult puzzle because, you had the two figures that you could more or less easily make those match. But the problem was, like, how far along are they supposed to be? Where are the edges supposed to be? And I think that's what made this puzzle difficult, is the edges were not well defined.
Well, and the figures were fairly similar, but not identical.
Yeah.
So, because I think that's what ended up happening at the end there. I think they had everything except like one on each figure.
No, the when Takeo said they had it and it was wrong, they had the two swapped, and you could see that the branches that each figure was standing on, one of them ended in like a spot that was supposed to be the edge, but it ended in the middle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you could see the branch was supposed to be like coming in from the side, but they had it going up and then just stopping dead in the middle because that's not where it was supposed to be. So I think they had the two figures right, but just in swapped positions.
Oh, yeah, that makes more sense. Yep.
Mm-hmm. So in any case, though, both sides were kind of panicking for a little while. And Takeo might have had it. You know what I mean? They certainly got to a point where they felt like it was good. And so they could have won it if they had it right. So the fact that Bayonne, won it's a perfect illustration of how it's easy to put the whole weight of the challenge on whoever's doing the puzzle, but having that extra time makes so much difference.
Right.
Meaning, like, without that extra time, they might not have won.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I appreciated like Jeff Varner's sort of amusing, like, they literally held their own fate in their hand.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, no, they weren't the original puzzle makers. They didn't arrive late. Like, they weren't the only ones that arrived late.
I feel like we ought to start calling Jeff Varner Jeff Machiavelli. But so this is where we had Spencer feeling glad to be more in control. And we knew that Jeff Varner was scheming, but it wasn't quite so obvious yet that how much luck he was going to have. Because it didn't even just become about the majority and the minority. It became everyone against Shireen and Spencer. And that happened really fast. And I think Kelly Wentworth recognized when she needed to, when to switch, so it didn't become everybody against Kelly Wentworth, Spencer, and Shireen. She recognized and flipped when she needed to, and I liked that. So at the same time, this is where, almost like an afterthought, Shireen and Spencer decide, maybe we ought to just check in with everybody we're expecting to vote with us and make sure, especially since Abby seems kind of upset, let's find out. And so Shireen goes to apologize and discovers, oh, she is really not okay with this. In fact,
and then
it's so much worse than we thought.
Yes, God. I mean, the way she laid it out was just so, I don't want to say diabolical, but it just sort of had this, like, and she's like, like she starts off so soft, like, I really wish you would come to me earlier because, Terry did, and now I think we're going to vote off one of you.
Yeah. It was like,
oh, but Abby, I'm sorry. And she looks at me and she goes, no.
Well,
I don't play that.
You could have said you were sorry back when I needed you to, and the fact that you didn't say it then is kind of a big part of what made me led me to this new decision.
Yeah.
So
Bye.
Too late.
Bye.
Yeah. So it was this harsh epiphany for Shireen and Spencer to realize how their perception of the game compared to what was really happening. That was such a rapid transition. And so that was just having them suddenly be in emergency damage control, but then only now recognizing that their sense of power before was really always pretty illusory. And it's things like they go to Wu and he's just like, why would I do that? Not only is there a substantial numbers majority against you that wouldn't change even if I did join you, but this is the first time you're even talking to me. Why in the world would I help you?
What I really loved about this is he still had that sort of like that woo face that he has, like when he's taking stuff in, but that on his first season, he was actually convinced by these types of things. And yeah, they were a little bit more well crafted, but there were those times where he was sitting there and he was like listening.
When you said woo face, it made me think of Office Space. I'm gonna show them my woo face. Woo!
No, but when that whole while he's like listening to all this dramatic stuff, and then he would be like, oh my God, I got to do a different thing. Oh, and he would that's what caused him the problems is he was so reactive. So he has learned. He's like, so he's doing that. And I'm like, oh gosh. Oh, wow. Is Wu going to do something crazy here? And he's like, yeah, what? This doesn't make any sense to me. No, guys. And honestly, I feel like, not that I wasn't pretty sure who was going to go anyway, Wu's demeanor and the fact that he mostly addressed Shireen pretty much told me everything. Like, it was clear that's who they wanted to go.
Yeah, I think because even though obviously the two of them were kind of doing that together, when I was talking earlier about how I think the two of them just clicked so much that they kind of got stuck in that click space without being aware of the outside. I think that was even more true of Shireen than Spencer, because Shireen hadn't found anybody like that in her previous season. And so she was so grateful to have someone she could relate to on that level, that it was really became her entire focus.
Yeah, so there was that, which was probably the major implication to it. She's not very, like, obviously in her first season, she didn't get along with a lot of people, so she didn't really make any bonds with anybody else. And not that Spencer did either, but Spencer is a more likable person when you're just looking at them sort of when you first meet them, which is kind of how we see them because we see them on TV. I feel like I don't feel like I would dislike Shireen, but I feel like if I was given the choice of two people to hang out with, I would choose Spencer. And I think that's kind of what they did, only having known them for a few days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see why that would be the case. And also, I think, we're just about at tribal council.
When I would say the last piece,
oh, sorry, yeah,
nailed it for Shireen is, not that Abby was like hard lobbying for her, but the reality is that was the person that she wanted to trust the most, and then directly turned her back on her.
Yeah.
And it sort of solidifies for, if they can deliver that for Abby, that revenge. It's not, the revenge isn't as just if it's just breaking up Shireen's alliance. It's much more just if it's, you thought you were in control, you laughed at me, now you're gone.
Well, and it could also be an element of, go ahead.
They get her more on board with what they're trying to do by delivering her that, even if she's not demanding it.
Mm-hmm.
That's almost more influential. Like, she doesn't demand it, but they offer it to her. And we, of course, don't see that because, we don't see it because you can't show those pieces of the episode because it would make it clear who it was.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking that it's kind of along that same line, but with the slight modification of, I would feel like there is an emotional component, but it would be less about like almost like a revenge thing of like, oh, you were the one that did this to me, so I'm going to get you out. But almost more like when you just had a breakup, you don't want to see your ex hanging around. That sort of a feeling. Like if there was awkward tension between Shireen had hurt Abby and then apologized, but it wasn't enough. But now there would be this tension there.
I mean, Abby did get kind of an evil grin when she said, like, yeah, I don't play that. Like, I'm going to get revenge. Like, she grinned at Shireen in like a kind of a, like, I'm going to get you way.
Yeah, but remember, though, that she kind of did that when Vetus got voted out at the last tribal council, but then we saw also that she was really still rocked by the getting the 4 votes.
Yeah.
So I think that the grin, while you're not wrong about it, I think that might sometimes be kind of a defense mechanism for her.
That's true. Well, and then there's also the piece to consider that, if these are the old school players and they do prefer to keep the tribe the strongest, that Spencer is the most likely to help them in challenges. If you had to pick 2 and you said, which one would you rather have in challenges? Like, you'd take him because he seems equal to her on, at least at the beginning, on puzzle making and that type of stuff, but yet more useful on some of the more athletic stuff.
Yeah.
And then the other piece is going basically on what you said, is that if you're trying to keep the tribe strong, you don't want Shireen in that tribe after having had Spencer kicked out. He made a much better plea for why he should be there. And I think that while the decision was made prior to that, the fact that he made that plea, they probably had already identified earlier in the day. or
Yeah.
or whatever.
We feel like we can work with Spencer by himself more than we would be able to work with Spencer or with Shireen if she didn't have Spencer.
Right. So they get that, like we talked, like I really liked about this, the merge of the old school and new school mentality, where Terry gets to, do what he thinks is right and also be strategic. And then here's this: we get to keep the tribe strong while breaking up the threats.
Yeah. So it turns out both old school and new school don't like it when you do nothing but talk about strategy all the time.
Yes.
They found something to bond over. It's funny that you kind of went there with it, because that's actually kind of the next point that I was going to make, which is, even though they probably had made up their decision beforehand, the different approaches that Spencer versus Shireen took in terms of how to approach the tribal council, because on the one hand, Spencer's making a lot of promises, but everybody of course knows that he is saying anything and everything he can think of in order to just have it not be him. Now, I was actually appreciative, and I respected that, he had said in one of his confessionals that he was really kind of bummed at facing the situation where, like, the one person he really was excited to play with is now the person that has to go home for him to stay. And he doesn't want to have to throw her under the bus, but he's not sure what else he can do. And I liked that that's not how it played out. He didn't try to convince people to vote for her. He just tried to sell himself. And I liked that. He's making promises. He's like, okay, I'll give you anything you guys want. And, whether they believe him or not, whether he seems like I would imagine he's sincere, but like, how long will it last? Can they really trust him? That sort of thing. But contrasted with Shireen, who I think maybe plays it more genuine, but is also not necessarily promising to be better. Like, she basically talks about how she's trying to change, but it's really hard, and she's not sure what more she can do. And so, like, it's hard to know where to go with that. I think that they had made their decision already, so it didn't ultimately sway them either way, but it's an interesting...
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to repeat myself that it's an interesting question to look at the two approaches.
Well, and I think that the approaches that they took in tribal council, they were probably already making those cases and somehow, like, people were getting those feelings out of them. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it surprised anybody that Shireen made one case and that Spencer made another one. Like, I think that's where they were at, is that, yeah, he's saying these things, like, he's making all these promises, but you know what? We feel like we can work with him, and we feel like, you know what? He is acknowledging what he did wrong, and he's offering to fix it. And she's not really interested in doing that because she's just so taken aback by what happened that she really can't right herself. That's probably the person that we would rather just move on.
Yeah. It's interesting now that, we've said goodbye to Shireen for this season. You may recall that in our pre-show, and then at the same time when they announced the cast at the end of the last season, I was a little concerned about having Shireen back on because she had been so vulnerable and read as kind of damaged the last time that I was wondering if it would really be good for her to be on again. And it's interesting now that, that arc has completed for this season, that it played out so differently. And I liked that. I think what would have been really sad is for it to go exactly like it did before.
Yeah.
But it didn't. And so I think that the way that it played out this time, I hope that it can be a really profound learning experience for her to recognize that
just because you've been bullied doesn't mean you can't be a bully.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And not only that it doesn't mean that you can't be, but it means that you might even have some sort of built-in subconscious desire to be. So at first opportunity, you will take it in a way that someone else who didn't have that baggage might not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a reason that it's pretty common that when you have a bully in school, he is often himself being picked on by someone else, someone bigger than him. You know, It's learned behavior frequently, not, you know, without exception, but. And so, but that whole thing of that behavior reiterating itself in turn, in a chain, and that sort of thing, and I hope that that's something that she can kind of learn from, to, you know, just recognize that it's all about having empathy with everyone, even the people that you feel like you can't get along with are still human beings. They have thoughts and feelings of their own, and like, even though we still, as much as I felt bad for Abby this time, and I was even kind of rooting for her in a way, we can't let her completely off the hook that everyone treated her that way because of how she had been acting.
Right.
You know, it's not like they just picked on her for no reason.
Right.
So, you know, she has to own that too.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I'm not sure she fully gets that yet, because I think there's still an aspect of, don't they see how hard I'm trying? They should be nicer to me.
Yep.
But anyway, at the same time, like I said, I never would have predicted that something might happen in the show where I would actually feel bad for her. But it did.
It did.
And so there's some exciting things happening. You know, there's a lot of interesting players this season, and there's a lot of people we really haven't even heard anything from yet. Monica?
It's true.
Sierra is primarily notable by having sat out the challenge.
And always collecting and delivering the idol.
Yeah. Which we should maybe not ignore the whole weird mess up where Probst almost forgot to have them give the idol back before the challenge and then called himself out on it. And there was this sort of weird awkwardness, like, are we supposed to tell him? I mean, what's happening here? Like, oh, you didn't make us give it back. That means we get to keep it.
Yeah.
Possession is 9/10 of Survivor. Or not. So in any case, next time, tribe mix-up going from 2 to 3.
3.
What? I'm not sure how I feel about that, actually. I mean, a mix-up is one thing, but from 2 to 3, that seems counterproductive at this stage of the season.
Yes. And yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about it all. Because it felt so weird,
Mm-hmm.
it made me feel like, are they throwing some kind of weird contingency that they keep into this season because of something? Like, do they not think people are getting enough interaction,
I don't know.
do they want to help save Spencer? Like, I didn't even know that these are real things. It's so weird that it just makes me like ponder them.
I mean, my assumption was it's just that, you know, there's only so many variations that they can do. They're trying to keep it fresh by doing things that they haven't really done before. And they haven't done this before that I can think of. So
yeah, what are we? We're at 9 and 7. I feel like.
Yeah, I think we started at 20.
Did we?
And yeah, I think so. And then it was 10 and 10, so it would now be 10 and 8.
Okay.
Yeah, because there were 9 votes this time, sending Shireen home.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, so 6 people per tribe.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sure it'll work fine. It's
Yeah,
just,
it'll work.
yeah, it just kind of, you feel like this stage of the game is supposed to be about narrowing rather than broadening. But we'll see how it works out. You know, I guess they'll try it and see what happens.
And so will we.
Yep. Next week on Talking About Survivor.
Yep.
All right. So thank you, everybody, for listening and or watching. This video version, of course, will go up on the YouTube channel and at christianaellis.com. And later this weekend, I will be posting the audio version as a podcast as well, also at christianaellis.com. So check them out, everybody, as well as everything else we and I do. So, and we'll be back next week. All right. Bye now.